So everything is a whole and a part. Everything is a holon. And there's a spectrum of holons, and they can become more complex. So you have the higher end of the spectrum and the lower end of the spectrum. They all need each other to exist. Consciousness can exist without our physiological makeup. So the higher depends on the lower. In that way, it is not saying that, oh, we're going to transcend out of our physiology and embrace spirit. We couldn't even conceive of spirit or even think or love or feel without this awareness that we have and the degree of complexity of this awareness that allow us to read and write and talk and feel and have the human experience. So this is all contingent upon our physiology, but at the same time, holons are not the sum of their parts. We aren't just one cell plus one cell plus one cell plus one cell plus a million cells equals human. It's not just we're not just lumps of matter. Equally important is the way matter is organized and the way it's structured. So that structure and the degree of complexity of that structure is also very important. So matter and form, and then the degree of how complex that matter and form is. So this is sort of the general idea that we're all part of. We're all whole parts. We're all holons, and there's this spectrum of evolution that we're a part of, and it's continuing to unfold. And Alan Watts himself, although I don't know if he was around when this whole spectrum of holon philosophy was created, but he probably would have agreed because he said something very similar, which is that everything is a part of everything else. You cannot have good with bad, night without day, wholeness without emptiness. Everything has an equal and an opposite. Everything is related. Nothing can exist without other. So everything is codependent, interrelated, intersubjective, and everything needs everything else. No man or no human being or no anything is an island. It's not yin or yang, and yin and yang. It's yin yang, and that means the masculine, aggressive, passive, feminine, passive, creative, feminine. Both of those are needed in order to create a dynamic whole. If you don't have one, which is impossible to not have one, but if you focus more on one than the other, often there are imbalances. This goes into Eastern philosophy, which I believe is a good point, and perhaps is needed more in Western philosophical circles that tend to focus on a binary form of logic, which says it's either A or B. It cannot be both. Interestingly, Yin Yang says that, oh, no, it is A and B, because neither could exist without one another. The night cannot be without the day. The life could not be without death. Your existence could not be without your non-existence. It gets pretty paradoxical, but it requires a form of thinking that is not so linear, and it is not so strictly logical. It demands us to step out of this binary form of logic and try to play around with our view of the world and of reality. And it does not mean it's less real. But in Brief History of Everything, Mulber describes, number one, that the cosmos, which is everything, is composed of holons. And then he describes all holons have four fundamental capacities: agency, communion, transcendence, and three, I guess. Okay. Agency, communion, and transcendence. I don't remember exactly what agency means, but I guess he's meaning the makeup of it. Like, what is a holon? Well, as a holon, I am a person. My agency is my identity, my image, I guess. And communion is how that agent reacts and interacts with the rest of the environment. And transcendence is the ability for this agent, working with other parts, to sort of synergize and create something new. So many different parts come together, and their interactions create something new, something that wasn't there before. Just like your brain, all the neurons come together, individual neurons come together and interact to create you, your mind, your dreams, your thoughts, your feelings, things that weren't there before. And solar systems do the same thing. They come together, create galaxies, and galaxy clusters, etc. It keeps going up. So the third tenet is that holons emerge, and by that he means exactly what we're saying. If you put enough stuff together and it starts interacting in a particular way, something new emerges. And then the fourth tenet is holons emerge holarchically. And this makes sense because, again, the solar system example is the best one. Elements, planets, solar systems, galaxies, galaxy clusters, universe. A holarchy is a basically developmental map. It looks like a spectrum of emerging greater complexity. Let me just sort of draw it really quick. See if this shows up. Maybe it won't. There we go. So it's growing up and out, and each layer emerges from the former layer. Each layer has a multiplicative capability. Instead of just adding up the sum of its parts, they multiply. They create something greater than before. And it's not that they're creating some kind of new object. It's not that spirituality necessarily is some kind of new essence that is independent of its former, but that the way everything's interacting creates a multiplicative reality, and it can't be just added up. You can't just add 10 planets and create a solar system. It's the way they interact. It's much more complex, which is why I say multiplicative instead of a summation. So there you go. That's holarchy. You could say that the beginning is a solar system, then goes to galaxies and universe structures and all that. So that is sort of what holarchy is. The fifth tenet is that each emergent holon transcends and includes its predecessors, which is what we're saying too. We're made up of our cells and our neurons, and that's how we exist. So this sort of creates a good way to see reality, and it almost sounds common sense to say this and to put it like this, but I kid you not, this is not taught in school. I mean, this is not taught in philosophy class, it's not taught in sociology, it's not taught in history. This framework is avoided, mostly because they try to avoid any kind of postmodern, or they try to enhance and emphasize sort of postmodern view that we need a diversity of things, we can't summarize and reduce stuff. It's rightly put, but it'll take a while for this to ever get into a school, any form of this understanding. And it's unfortunate, but we need more of this out there, because it's able to reconcile some major problems that philosophies that I've taken in class have had. It's actually able to answer the problems. For instance, in my philosophy paradoxes class I'm taking this semester, there's the problem that we're talking about right now with holons. How does something become something else? If you put something together, how does a solar system emerge from planets? Does that mean the solar system is another object? There's no empirical evidence for anything more than the sum of its parts. Well, yes, but again, they're seeing it too linearly. It's not just the sum of its parts, it's how the parts are multiplied together, how they interact and create something new. It's not that there's a separate object. That's just a linguistics paradox, a linguistics dead end, I guess you could say. You have to kind of understand that it means not something so linear, but actually something interrelated and correlative and connected. And yes, a new object can exist from a bunch of little objects. And yeah, it was just one example of one of the paradoxes we've had. And simply because there was no holarchical and not hierarchical, but a holarchical view of reality, and which is equally valid, because some of these philosophies are pretty ridiculous, and for this not to be in there is kind of sad. But that's just besides the point. But okay, so the secret impulse of evolution: molecules transcend atoms, not the sum of its components. New levels cannot be reduced in all their ways to the junior dimensions. A solar system cannot be reduced to 10 planets, or something like that. And we'll go over the rest of this in the next video.